Bro, I see Tier Limit and Sprite, I sleep. But if I see Thunder Dragons top an event, I wake. What's going on with ya, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day is going phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. YCS Minniapolis, well, it was something. If you decided to watch the live stream instead of touching grass this weekend, then what you probably would have seen was Tier Limit Sprite, Tier Limit Sprite, Sprite Tier Limit, Bestial Sprite, everything is just Tier Limit Sprite. But I think if you looked hard enough, you would actually find some brilliant Yu-Gi-Oh decks that can actually compete with some of the top tiers. Personally, I think that Darkwing Blast was just way too new for this weekend. Imagine a core set coming out on Friday for everyone, and you would have to have all the cards by Saturday morning. Yo, who comes up with this scheduling, dog? That's like that one time your mama said you could stay up all night if you drunk that NyQuil. You know you wasn't staying up all night, but you drunk the NyQuil anyways. For players trying to win an event, I think it would be best to go with instead of trying something new on the fly, especially seeing that you have less than 24 hours to perfect it. But that being said, there were actually some really interesting techs being played in some of the top decks. Of course, I'll be explaining some cards that really stood out to me, as well as going over some of the top decks. And before I get into it, I gotta give a mad thanks to Carlancho Store for providing the pictures. You guys are awesome. So YCS Minniapolis had just about over 1,100 people, making it one of the biggest events that we've had this year. And just like I said, with Darkwing Blast just coming out, there were some really cool cards that people were using from the set, but there were also some cards that people were using from past sets. Take, for example, being able to break a board in today's Yu-Gi-Oh! Is probably the most important thing right now, and there are some relatively easy cards to use, one being Evenly Matched. Throughout the course of the event, I seen Evenly Matched put in so much work. It was ridiculous. Now, it was a little odd seeing Evenly Matched be so effective because we know that Sprite can summon totally awesome now because of Sprite Sprint, and we also know that Tier Limit players have been playing Tier Limit Crime. But to counterbalance that, players were playing cards like Lava Golem and Winged Dragon Era Sphere Mode. Also, cards like Dark Ruler No More and Super Polymerization seen a ton of play. I actually think I should make a Board Breakers tier list because there are so many powerful ones. I want you to post down below in the comment section if that's something you want to see. The most powerful hand traps I've seen were easily Droll and Lockbird. That card was ridiculous. Because almost every variant of Sprite and Tier Limit surged so much, resolving a Droll and Lockbird was essentially game for a lot of decks. Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill was putting in that work because it could be activated on your turn and your opponent's turn. And even Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring did his thing. I actually can't wait to make you guys a hand trap tier list. Let me know if that's something that you want to see too. But of course, the talk of the town was the cards that players could get from Darkwing Blast. It was the Bestial monsters. There were times on stream where we seen Bestial shut down a player's entire turn. Having reliance on the graveyard can come at a cost when you are relying on light and dark monsters going against these cards. YCS Minniapolis had over 1,100 players, and going into the top 32, 50% were Tier Limits, 28% were Sprite, 10% were Flew Under Reese, 6% were Bestial variants, 3% were Exosister, and 3% were Despia. Now, this is actually a big change from our other YCSs where Sprite was dominant. This time around, Tier Limit has taken the lead despite Bestial monsters being prevalent. Now, unfortunately, at this time, I wasn't able to get you that Despia profile. I'm pretty sure somebody will link it in the comment section once we get it. But moving on, there was actually a lot of different Tier Limits in Sprite. No one really played the same deck. The build of Tier Limit that I love the most is easily the branded Tier Limit build. Jack Reed has a pretty good example of what I'm talking about. This deck is actually crazy. This particular deck can summon Tier Limit Brukalos to the side of the field before committing a monster, meaning that the Bestial cards are not as powerful. Also, because of Red Cartesia, it can synchro summon into Baron de Fleur, so this deck actually has quite the few disruptions alongside of a Bahamut Shark into a totally awesome. My favorite part about this deck is that Branded and High Spirits can send Tier Limit Brukalos to the graveyard alongside another Tier Limit monster in your hand, allowing you to fusion summon and also be able to add cards like Red Cartesia to be able to fusion summon again or synchro summon, or your Albion for a free draw. Now those were some really interesting versions of Sprite and Tier Limit, and unfortunately I got more to show you. Inside of the top 16, there was 6% Bestial, 13% Fluendaris, 31% Sprite, and 50% Tier Limit. Tier Limit still keeping half of representation is pretty big. We've seen in other tournaments where it starts to dwindle off the higher we go, but it's not happening this time. But I feel once players get settled into the format a bit more, they'll figure out that there are other strategies and ways to be able to beat even some of the most fearsome decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's take, for example, David Erpin's Thunder Dragon list, which is very reminiscent of 2019. You have your Dragon Link cards, your Danger cards, and of course your Thunder Dragon engine, but I like this deck because it actually plays around so much into this meta. The Bestial monsters are really good against light and dark attributed decks, but if you're banishing your opponent's Thunder Dragon monsters, then you're actually giving them advantage. And also seeing that this is a Thunder Dragon deck, when your opponent uses powerful cards that are good against tier limits like Dimensional Shifter against you, you can still play Yu-Gi-Oh! And build a board to your liking. I think David's deck shows us what Darkwing Blast has more in store for us. There are so many brilliant strategies out there in Yu-Gi-Oh! That can combat with some of the other decks. I think it's going to be a fairly good time once we do get settled in. All you have to do is just take a step back and process what's going on, and as you can see, this Thunder Dragon deck did exactly just that. There was also some more innovation like Clifton Land's Rocket Dragon Link deck. We already knew that this deck was going to be powerful, and Clifton shows us this. I gotta say that me and Clifton do play a lot of the same cards, but with 10 Bestial monsters in the main board, 7 of them being DD Crow-like effects, he is well equipped for the tier limit matchup. Against other matchups, he does his Rocket Dragon Link thing and dares the opponent to break his board, and then even the sideboarded Rivalry of the Warlords is extremely good because this is a matchup where players typically side out back row removal, meaning that your Rivalry of the Warlords could catch your opponent slipping and lock them out of the game. And speaking against playing against the meta fairly wrong, I'm actually happy when I'm wrong because Exosister did make a huge splash not only on stream, but in the top 32. Take a look at Lyric Brunner's Exosister deck. This deck is just oozing. Activate a Bestial and see what happens, as not only will he be able to trigger his Exosister monster effects, he'll be able to Exceed summon into some really powerful monsters. He also plays one of the best cards to stop some of the most competitive decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! In Necro Valley. This card can easily sway the game into your favor. I think that the correct way to play Exosister is, of course, if you go first, just summon Martha Forehead, but if you go second, cards like Evenly Matched and Dark Ruler no more allow you to break the board and still be able to play Exosister, and of course, if they're banking on their Bestial monsters to back them up, they might have something else coming. Moving on into the top 8, tier limits still keep 50% of their showings, with Fluendaris and Sprite splitting 25% each. This is no real surprise here, but I'm going to show you Dennis Nada's tier limit deck just to show you that King of the Swamp variants can still be pretty powerful. Also, like the Tecton Guardian Chimera here, this is actually really cool. As you know, King of the Swamp allows you to search polymerization. You combine that with your Branded and High Spirits, you can make Rue Kalos before committing a monster. In the top 4, there was 1 Sprite, 1 Fluendaris, and 2 tier limit, though that tier limit could be considered as cheating. And the reason why I say this is because the tier limit deck is a Sprite deck as well, so kinda. In third place was Marcus Hayden's Runic Sprite build. This is pretty similar to the Sprite builds that were played in Utrecht. I do like that Dorama Cannon was being used here. Really cool at being able to flip all the monsters face down. Your opponent won't be able to Exceed or Link summon with those monsters. And with Triple Tactics talent in the main board as well as the sideboard, I think it's a very powerful Yu-Gi-Oh card. If you don't already have your copies, I would consider picking them up before it's too late. In second place comes Michael Thomas's Fluendaris deck, and I ain't gonna lie, I'm looking at it a little different because he said the only thing he do is go second. There are a ton of going second cards inside of this Fluendaris deck to help him. 3 Lightning Storm, 3 Evenly Matched, 2 Mystic Mine. Yo! I mean, think about it. Taylor and Sprite can't play Mystic Mine. There are a couple of things that I like about Fluendaris inside of this format. The first thing is that Dimensional Shifter can be used over and over and over again because they can remove cards out of their graveyard. The next is Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds. I said it. But what I think is equally as important as those two cards is going to be Harpy's Featherstorm. This can completely shut off a Tier Limits player entire turn. Floowandereeze don't have 3, they have 7 automatic win buttons, and with Pot of Duality and Pot of Prosperity in their deck, they can get to them pretty fast. The deck is also immune to Bestial cards, Artifact Scythe, and Super Polymerization. Yo, I ain't gonna cap, I'm looking at these Floowandereeze a little different right now. Our winner and 4-time champion will be Christopher LeBlanc's Tearlament Sprite deck, and this is really good. What I love here is that he plays a lot of the Tearlament spell and trap cards, Tearlament Grief, Tearlament Scream, Tearlament Heartbreed, and of course, Tearlament Sullyk. These cards may not seem like much, but not only are they great on-field effects, they actually have some really good effects when sent to the graveyard. He also size in a full Bestial package, my guy. Talk about being ready for the Tearlament mirror match. Personally, so far, there's a few things that stick out to me about this event. Both Tearlament and Sprite can be played in so many different ways, I don't think that there's a consensus build that's better than the others. Because the different variations to play make it a little bit harder to be able to pinpoint exactly what to beat, as well as Power of the Elements being a lot older of a set, combined with Darkwing Blast coming out the day before the event, I think that was a huge reason why Sprite and Tearlament were so dominant. The Bestial cards are insane. If your deck can play with or against them fairly well, it's a good choice. And hand traps or board breakers, they're optional, but you don't have to play 20 million like in last format. And that's all that I have for my meta-analysis post-YCS Minniapolis. Of course, if you want to see more amazing content, you already know what to do. Click on one of these two.